How's it going, everyone? This is MOS Tricks, and in this video we're going to be covering the top 5 ways to approach in Rushdown Revolt. When approaching, your main objective is to try and close the gap and give yourself an opportunity to make contact. Approaching in and of itself does not always mean that you're trying to hit your opponent immediately, but rather you're trying to catch your opponent off guard or trick them into making mistakes that you can capitalize on. And with all that being said, let's get started with number 1. You may have noticed that the average horizontal aerial drift in Rushdown Revolt is quite slow. And so, trying to jump straight in on your opponent is very telegraphed and very easily punished. This is where air rushing comes into play. Air rushing is the most common type of approach option you will see in Rushdown Revolt. An air rush can be performed by jumping, then quickly pressing the rush button in the desired direction. You have the ability to air rush facing forwards and facing backwards. This provides you the ability to approach with total control and have access to all of your aerials. This means if your character has a strong or disjointed back air, having access to it as a reverse aerial rush is very easy. Of course, since air rush can be performed in all directions, it can be used for approaching as well as retreating. This is a staple movement that everyone should have in their kit since the versatility is so powerful. Air rushes can also be used in a bait and punish playstyle as well. By pressing down during a super jump, you can lunge at your opponent and create an unreactable situation. This can be one of the best ways to overwhelm your opponent and also punish them from a great distance. And like I had mentioned before, approaching does not always mean that you have to immediately make contact. Mixing super jumps and rushes can create very jarring movement, which is very difficult to deal with. The more ambiguous your approach, the more indecisive your opponent will be as to how they should defend themselves. You can also add cross-ups to keep your opponent guessing and potentially catch them with terrible DI. This particular movement option does require spark, but it is definitely worth learning. Number 3. Using your double jump. Although it looks very simple, this is one of the best ways to get your opponent to whiff an attack or whiff a grab right in front of you for an easy punish. By being so close to your opponent, you can create hesitation or panic, in which case you can capitalize off of both. If your opponent freezes up, then they'll be wide open for a punish. Number 4 is the strike rush. You can generate a huge momentum boost by charging a strike during a rush. This is typically used as a follow-up option, but in a lot of cases it can also be very powerful for whiff punishing. As an added bonus, you can also turn around your strike by pressing the opposite direction during the slide of your rush. I would like to mention that the effectiveness of the strike rush is character dependent, so be sure to experiment with your character. This technique can also be very valuable during tech chasing. And finally, number 5, and possibly the most overlooked approach option, is the shield rush. Shield rushing, although very simple, is one of the most powerful options in the game. This is because it forces very risky counterplay out of your opponent, such as trying to cross you up and also going for grabs. Not to mention, shields are also unbreakable. If your opponent does happen to have moves that can counterplay shields from a distance, this will also open up your game to approach in other ways. By forcing your opponent to respect your shield, the rest of your kit will open up and your combo game will also be able to flourish. I understand that approaching can be extremely difficult and you may find yourself in disadvantage a lot. But thankfully I made a guide on the top 5 things you need to know to escape disadvantage, and you can watch that video next right here.